Our emotions rule most of our lives the majority of the time. Whether it's us reacting to a situation happening before our very eyes, or maybe it's the emotions we feel when we finally succeed at something we really worked hard for. Emotions are in many ways amazing and bring us life. They give us the highs and the lows. And yet, ultimately, every single moment of the day, our brain is constantly managing, shifting, changing, and trying to predict what's happening before us. Our brain's a pretty powerful tool in that way. I was reading a book a few weeks ago called Crucial Conversations. I highly recommend it, and I'm for sure going to do a video on it in a little while here in a couple weeks. But what I talked about there really brought to my mind how we are practically emotionally illiterate. We never really grew up past that time with our parents or our friends where we always told them, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm angry. It was a very basic terminology to use for how we're feeling, when I believe humans are way more complicated than that. So how do we get around this? What do we do about it? I think it's time we take a deeper dive and break that down and look at how we can give ourselves some literacy in this subject field to be able to show us and be able to tell everyone else how we actually feel. Because I think ultimately this will help us begin to know ourselves better and allow others in. Because how am I going to let someone else in when all I can tell them is I'm sad, when I could be feeling so many more complex feelings underneath that? So let's have a conversation about it. Welcome to Young Humanity. So you might be wondering why we need some new fancy terms or different set of terminology to be able to describe our emotions to others. And I think it's a fair and honest question. And I'm gonna try to break it down in this video in two ways. One, I'm gonna give you a story from my past that began to explain actually how I was feeling in those moments. Because I know looking back on it now, I couldn't see it at the time, and my only expression was a basic way of understanding. And then I'm gonna break it down into a nice smaller story that maybe you can apply in your own life right now. Maybe you're in school and I think it'll really apply to you there. Have you ever been in a situation where someone wants to talk to you about something personal? Maybe that's a close friend of yours, a teacher, a parent who wants to talk to you about something. Maybe it's going on in school, maybe it's a friendship, maybe it's a relationship you have. And you know in those moments when that conversation starts to begin, you feel a swell of this emotion. Or maybe you are in a certain life circumstance, a situation you find yourself in, that you yourself feel this general emotion. And you want to talk to someone about it, but you don't know how. Because I know I wasn't there too long ago. Does using the more basic terms of I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm angry really begin to encapsulate all of those complex emotions and feelings we have as people? Maybe there are times where those can apply, but I think for the most part they don't. They don't quite get to the nitty-gritty part of how we're feeling to be able to actually start to grow and change how we are doing in that situation. I feel when those emotions become so strong, that's when those more basic terms start to break down, right? Maybe I am feeling this greater sense of happiness, but what's lying underneath that? There could be a lot of different things. Maybe it's I'm feeling hopeful, I'm feeling, energized, there's something to look forward to, excitement. I feel like happy is just such a basic term when it comes to something of such a strong and intense feeling. I feel if we break down those basic phrases, those basic terms like we are trying to, it actually leads to a better understanding of ourselves, and it begins to allow us to express to others how we're really feeling to give them the best chance to help us if we need it. Let's look back at a situation that I found myself in, where I had this general feeling of sadness, where I couldn't really understand what I was feeling. I just felt upset most of the time. Now at that time, I had just graduated from a polytechnical institute with my civil engineering diploma. I also came out with a 4.0 GPA. Now that's not to brag by any means. I think it actually really gives good context and good background as I continue through the story. Shortly after that feeling began in the fall, I graduated and I began working in the field that I had gone to school for. I had just started a brand new relationship. I had lots of loving friends, a very loving family, and yet over that time, I still felt this general sense of sadness. You might be asking, why is that? It seemed like my life was put together rather well, actually. From the outside in, you would never really know that I was struggling by any means. And part of that was because I didn't know how to ask for help. It was almost a constant battlefield in my mind of I'd go home after, school or seeing friends or seeing my new relationship, and I would just my mind would rattle through the day of this sense of upset, of sadness. It actually wasn't a year or so later, even after that initial beginning of the emotion, that things began to change. It took a massive change in career yet again, the pandemic, and a lot of self-realization and digging deeper when it finally clicked about really how I was feeling in that time. See, sadness was this basic term that I could put up. That, you know, it's easy to tell someone that I'm feeling sad, but it didn't help them help me in any ways, right? It was like putting a band-aid on a very bloody wound that really wasn't gonna make a difference in the long run. You know, it would help for the next 10 minutes, and after that, you know, it was gonna bleed through it anyways. That's when I looked deeper and found out that I was actually having a sense of hopelessness. I was self-loathing, I was hypercritical of myself, and in many ways didn't think I was going to become anything. Now, how do I explain that to someone when I say I'm just feeling sad? Because those emotions underneath are so much more complex than that basic term could ever truly describe. I think it's important for ourselves, especially in our younger years, and I wish I had this kind of advice back then, was to try to understand your emotions better. Try to dive a little deeper, dig a bit more, and understand that maybe that sense of anger or sadness is actually a lot of things underneath. Something more complex, but more concrete and can lead to actual changes. Maybe it was that teacher bringing you aside after class and telling you, hey, you didn't do so well in that exam, we should talk. And in that moment, you felt angry. And it's not to say that's a bad emotion to feel by any means. It's something inside of you. If you're feeling that way, it's something to look at. But maybe underneath that anger, the more complex feelings you had was actually a sense of confusion and frustration, because you actually had studied really hard for that exam and you didn't really understand how you could have ended with that grade. When you break it down like that, it's much easier for us to actually build a beneficial conversation rather than one that'll hinder us in the long run. Now imagine, instead of yelling at the teacher or shutting down because of the sense of anger you're feeling, you approached them and said, hey, I actually studied really hard for that exam and I still didn't do as well as I hoped for. That conversation is something that can be constructive. You can build off of that. The teacher can now understand how you're feeling and why you're feeling it. And it's not just this wall of anger where you don't want to dig any deeper and you don't want to actually come to a solution that can benefit you. I implore you, whether you're young or old, to now take the time to dig into those emotions that you're feeling on a day-to-day basis. Maybe that happiness, the term of happiness, of sadness, or of anger can apply to what you're feeling, but when they start to get strong, try to take a step back and look into them. And try to understand really what's going on. Maybe you have many more complex emotions underneath, ones that can better describe how you're feeling, allow you to know yourself better, and to allow others in to properly help you. Don't make it a band-aid solution. Make it something long-term. Because I know that will lead to a better you. It's led to a better me. And I find more rewarding to talk about my emotions on a deeper level rather than just blanket term them saying I'm happy or I'm sad. It helps you live the higher highs and helps you understand the lows. I think it's important for us to really try to do this on a daily basis. If you want to watch another video on an emotion of fear, please click the video in one of the top corners. If you haven't, please subscribe to the channel. This is the kind of content we do, and I aim to help others learn how to grow and better understand themselves. And if you haven't, please like this video so others can see it so they can benefit as well. And we'll see you next week.